Now, Trudeau says what Freeland faced isn't isolated and is being seen with increasing frequency by people in public life, such as my next guest. Nahanni Fontaine is an NDP MLA representing a riding in Winnipeg. Nahanni, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first, I wanted to ask you for your reaction, your thoughts on what happened to the Deputy Prime Minister over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many women politicians who saw that video, or many women in general, I was left with just a sick feeling in my stomach to see that level of violence, leveled against the Deputy Prime Minister. And, unfortunately, it's something that many of us, many women politicians understand and actually face ourselves. And I would suggest that particularly, women and gender diverse BIPOC politicians know that all too well and face that, either online or in person or in emails or in DMs. Like, it's actually nonstop. And so, as one woman politician to another woman politician, I was quick to denounce what I saw and, offer support and solidarity to the Deputy Prime Minister, as we should be doing. One of the things that I think is really disconcerting is when you see, narrative or discourse online saying, well, she deserved it. And, if you're a politician, you should expect that this is going to happen. No public servant gets into this job, particularly women and particularly BIPOC women politicians get in this job to be harassed, intimidated, bullied, and to face that level of violence. And it's, I think, really indicative of the levels of violence and the ways that they manifest themselves for women in politics.
And now you mentioned that this is not something that is infrequent. Certainly we have seen many instances of this documented online in the past few years. We know that the Mayor of Calgary, for example, was very public about her experience. But I wanted to ask you what your experience has been since you've been in politics.
Yeah. For me, I started campaigning in 2016, and it happened immediately on the campaign trail. And in fact, I remember one particular all candidates candidate forum, and the campaign manager of the, one of the other folks that were running was standing outside the only doors that you could exit and was swearing, saying, she's gonna effing get it, wait till she effing gets it, referring to me. And I actually had to be surrounded by supporters in order to leave a space. And that was the first kind of, incident like that, but it hasn't stopped. I mean, as just less than a year ago, I organized a pro-choice abortion rally. And just as I was getting up to go and speak to the folks that were there, a gentleman started to try to get up the stairs to get to me. Luckily, I'd already alerted my staff and the security, and they blocked him. But then after the event, several legislative security had to block him from getting to me. So, this is not uncommon. And, you're always asked as women politicians, well, you've got to develop thick skin. Trust me, I have thick skin. And, I would suggest and submit that most women politicians have thick skin. We wouldn't be elected if we didn't. But what that does is that diminishes the level of risk and threat that we're under. And then you have politicians that are, particularly those that are on the right, who actually fan the flames and are creating a really dangerous environment rather than coming out quickly and swiftly denouncing these types of actions. We just saw the other day, from the leader or from somebody who's, trying to be the next prime minister, attempt to make it about himself in a 30-second clip. We need politicians of all stripes to immediately and quickly denounce this, and particularly men to stand up for their women colleagues.
And, to that point, and there's a couple of things that I want to pick up on. The first thing, though, is that I want to sort of broaden that out a bit because, of course, we know it's not just prominent female politicians. Very recently, we've been seeing a lot of female journalists, specifically BIPOC journalists, who've also been targeted online and the sort of comments and threats that they've received. These are death threats, rape threats, violence against themselves, against their families. This sort of discourse is what's being thrown out to these members of the media as well. And we've seen the Prime Minister, for example, tweet about that. In specific, in some cases, it is against women of color who are in the media. In terms of the solidarity that we see politicians really sort of trying to channel in terms of fighting that, are there more steps that can be taken, not just speaking out, but for example, we know that there was legislation in 2021, before the 2021 election, talking about online harms, a bill that died due to the election. Is there something that can be done legally that can try to protect female politicians, women of color, female, media personalities who are facing this?
Yeah. I mean, I think if anything, what we've seen in the last 48 hours is a wake-up call for folks in those leadership positions that have the power to change the criminal code to actually do something. Again, we just need to go back to 2016 when Joe Cox, right, a British MP, was murdered. I know that none of us want to see that happen here in Canada. And so this is a wake-up call for, the Prime Minister, for all political parties to start looking at legislation and additional protections for women politicians, for BIPOC politicians, for gender diverse politicians, and certainly for journalists. I mean, we've seen it for many years now, this this narrative of fake news, and then the violence that perpetrates in the lives and work of, particularly, again, female journalists and BIPOC journalists. We have the opportunity to create legislation and put policies in place that will contribute to those protections. Again, we don't want to be, weeks from now or months from now, or even in a couple of years from now, with somebody, again, with the level of violence as it's raising exponentially, for somebody to get seriously harmed. And so we have to do something now. We have to take this issue seriously. We have to stop diminishing it, and we have to stop dismissing it. And so, let me just say this to that end. I'm so proud and in awe and stand in solidarity with women politicians and journalists across the country who have courageously shared their stories and have spoken up, either in media or, online. That takes a lot of guts and courage to be able to do that, because again, the narrative is, just, develop thick skin. Well, we face additional risks and threats that, our male colleagues do not. And so, again, I'm so proud of the women and BIPOC folks that have come out and have shared their experiences. Now is the opportunity and the time to ensure that we're all safe while we're doing our job.
Very finally, Nahanni, I did want to ask you in terms of the future. You mentioned a case from a few years back where somebody acted on a threat of violence. Certainly, we've seen it documented by Statistics Canada that there has been an increase in hate crimes in recent years. So what is your fear or your concern for the future, given the frequency at which we're seeing these threats and these sorts of confrontations and this environment or climate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that there's, this reality that for women and gender diverse folks, the expectation on us is that we need to shrink ourselves. We need to, not make any sudden moves that's going to irritate or escalate the men that, show violence against us. And, I personally, I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that I have to operate in a space where, one, I can't operate the same as my male colleagues, two, that I have to shrink myself, or three, that I have to be quiet about the violence that we're seeing. And so, I think, again, to encourage those women and gender diverse folks, both within politics and journalism, to speak out. I think that the more that we speak out, the more that we put these things on display for the public to see, the more opportunity there is for discourse and for change. And so, you know, again, maybe it's a little bit easier for me to say, like, I refuse to shrink myself doing the job that I was elected to do. You don't like a woman politician? Vote her out. Run yourself. But there is no room and no, opportunities for violence. And so I think we all have to speak out. We all have to be diligent about that. And we all have to show courage on every spectrum of the political spectrum.
Thanks so much for joining us and for your thoughts on this very important conversation that's happening in our country.
Miigwech.